Have you noticed how little you actually own anymore? Not your music, not your movies, not even a lot of the software you need to function. More and more of daily life is being rented back to you through subscriptions. Adobe, Spotify, Netflix, even features in some cars are now locked behind paywalls. That is not happening because these things are naturally scarce. It is happening because ownership weakens dependence. The moment you own the tool outright, the company loses part of its leverage over you. That is the issue. What we are watching is not just a change in consumer habits. It is capitalism reacting to a deeper problem. Technology keeps reducing the cost of producing and distributing goods, and capitalism keeps trying to preserve profitability anyway. Jeremy Rifkin wrote about this in the Zero Marginal Cost Society. His point was very straightforward. As the marginal cost of producing one more unit of something falls towards zero, profit starts losing its role as the central organizing logic of the economy. You can already see it happening. Take solar power. Yes, panels cost money to manufacture and install, but once they are in place, the marginal cost of generating additional electricity becomes extremely low. The sunlight is already there. You are not paying more every time another watt of electricity is produced. Open source software works in a similar way. Writing the code takes labor, time, and skill, but once it exists, giving one more person access to it costs almost nothing. You can see the same pattern emerging in physical production. 3D printed housing points toward a world where building one more home can take less labor, less transport, less waste, and less money than conventional construction. The details vary by technology, but the direction is consistent. More and more of what we need can be produced with less labor, less cost, and less dependence on centralized gatekeepers. That matters because once the cost of making and sharing things keeps falling, the market has less and less left to justify. If the sun can power your home, if design files can be copied endlessly, and if knowledge can move freely, then the market is no longer doing the job it once did. More and more often, it is inserting friction so somebody can keep charging for access. That is what the subscription economy really is. Movies disappear from platforms even after they've already been made. Software stops functioning unless you keep paying. You are not buying the song. You are leasing access. You do not own the tool. You are renting conditional use of it. The logic becomes obvious once you see it. Capitalism depends on scarcity. When real scarcity starts weakening, it has to manufacture artificial scarcity in its place. That is why everything gets locked down. Licensing agreements, proprietary formats, patent walls, access tiers, closed ecosystems, software as a service, paywalled features. These are not random annoyances. They are defensive structures. They exist to simulate constraint in a world where technology keeps reducing the material basis for constraint. Buckminster Fuller saw this contradiction long before most people. He understood that much of modern economic life had stopped being organized around real human need and had become organized around preserving the requirement that people must earn the right to exist. So the system keeps inventing layers of unnecessary labor and administrative overhead just to justify itself. Fuller also gave us the idea of ephemeralization, doing more and more with less and less until eventually you are doing everything with nothing. That is the actual direction of technological development when it is allowed to unfold. Less matter, less energy, less labor, lower cost, higher capability, automation, miniaturization, distributed production, precision fermentation, local fabrication, adaptive systems, cleaner energy. All of it points in that direction. But capitalism cannot let that kind of system fully mature. Because if technology really starts reducing toil and dependency, then the whole moral structure of the system begins to crack. The old story says people must sell their labor to survive because survival depends on scarce production. But what happens when production no longer requires the same amount of labor? What happens when access can widen without the market standing in the middle? What happens when the system's main economic role becomes withholding abundance so somebody can keep charging for it? At that point, profit stops looking like coordination and starts looking like obstruction and parasitism. That is the real crisis. Capitalism is trying to force a scarcity economy onto tools that keep making scarcity less central. Instead of using technology to reduce necessary labor and expand freedom, it uses technology to reorganize dependence. Instead of letting abundance lower coercion, it rebuilds coercion through subscriptions, locked access, and platform control. So the real conflict is not just between old technology and new technology. It is between two different systems. One depends on rationing, exclusion, enclosure, and conditional access. The other points toward wider distribution, lower coercion, and materially real freedom. That is where Enlightenment socialism matters. It starts from a basic recognition. If production costs keep falling, if energy becomes cheaper, if knowledge becomes easier to share, and if labor becomes less necessary for meeting basic needs, then profit can no longer serve as the organizing principle of a sane society. At that stage, profit is not coordinating social life. It is standing in the way of it. And that is what capitalism is really afraid of. The danger is not just that things become cheaper. The danger is that people become freer, free to learn without permission, free to create without gatekeepers, free to explore without constant economic panic and financial anxiety, free to become as a normal condition of being alive in a society whose productive powers no longer require mass insecurity in order to function. That freedom is not abstract. It is sunlight hitting a panel. It is food produced with less toil. It is the growing possibility that life no longer has to be organized around deprivation.